Hello, and welcome to this PanelPilotACE tutorial using property triggers and timers. For this tutorial, we are going to create a two-screened project that has a clock on the first screen and, using a timer, switches to the next screen after the timer is up. The next screen has a dial, and when the needle hits a certain value, for this example it is going to be 7, it is going to set off an alarm using a property trigger. The first step for this project is to add a gradient gray background. So add a rectangle to the screen. Change the position from 0 to 0 and make the width 480 and the height 272. Right-click on the rectangle and choose Add Gradient Fill. Do Linear Gradient. You can delete the first rectangle. Change the positions to 0, 0 again. Make the orange a light gray and the white a dark gray. Once this is created, we are going to add a title for this screen. So add a text box. Change the text for this to General Timer. Click and drag the box to make it large enough for the text. Bold the text and put it at the top of the screen. Next, we are going to add a rectangle that will house the clock. The dimensions are going to be 160 by 90. Change the color to a light gray and make a corner radius of 10. Center it on the screen. The next step is to add a text box to fill the middle of the rectangle we just made. So add a text box, change the font size to 24, and make sure you change the width from 160 and 90. Center it on the screen and center the text. Name this Time Text. After the text box is created, we are going to need to add the function element Date and Time Display. So go over to the function elements and add Date and Time Display. For this project, we are going to use the computer system default time zone. The text element used for this project will be time text. For the date and time format, click on the instructions. From here, you will be able to format the time to be displayed however you would like. Today, we are going to use the format HMMSSA. Click Save. To continue our project, we are going to need to add a second screen. So right-click on Screens and select Add New. Name the first screen Timer Screen, and name the second screen Trigger Screen. Now that we have another screen, go back to the first screen. On the first screen, add an action load screen to the project. When called, this screen loader should load the second screen, which is the trigger screen. Next, we are going to add a timer to the project. When the timer is complete, it will perform a certain action. For this project, the start delay is going to be 3000 milliseconds. We will repeat the behavior one time, and the action element for this timer will be the screen loader we just created. We do not need to set the interval because when the timer is complete, it will go to the next screen, so the interval does not need to repeat. So when the timer runs out, which is 3 seconds, it will call the screen loader and switch to the next screen. For the next screen, we're going to need to add a needle and dial. You can find a needle and dial from PanelPilotACE University found on Lascar Electronics website. Proceed by adding both the needle and dial to the project. Center them both on the screen. Name the dial, dial, and the needle, needle. Go back to the first screen and copy and paste the background. Paste the background into this screen. And change the position to 0, 0. Right click and go Send to Back to make sure the needle and dial are in front. To make the needle move on the dial, we will need to add an analog input hardware element. So go down and add analog input. This will allow us to receive data from an outside source into the PanelPilotACE and move the needle accordingly. We do not need to change any of the elements for this analog input. The next function element we are going to need to add to the project is a rotating needle. This function element will tie the needle to the analog input we just created. So for the analog input element, make it the one we just created. The visual element is going to be the needle, and the angle range is going to be from 0 to 256 degrees. If you preview this in Emulator and wait for the timer, which is 3 seconds, take the analog input and you can see you can move the needle. X out of this. Next, we need to create a property trigger that will be triggered when the needle hits a certain amount. To do so, we are first going to need to add a red alarm to the project. Like before, you can find one from PanelPilotACE University. So copy and paste a red alarm and paste it into the project. Move it over to the top right of the project. Name this red alarm. Next, we are going to need to add actions that will either make the alarm visible or invisible. To do so, we are going to need to add action change properties to the project. Double-click red alarm. At the bottom, you can change it from visible to invisible and select visible. Name this turn on red alarm. Add one more action change properties. Double-click red alarm again. Click visible, but this time turn it off to make it invisible. Name this turn off red alarm. This step is now complete. The next step is to add a logic builder. So add logic builder. Add a logical action. The expression is going to have 3 values. The first value is going to be analog input, with the property of voltage. Next is going to be greater than, and it's going to be 7. The action is going to be turn on red alarm. This will turn on the alarm when the analog input goes above 7. Now the default action for this logic builder is going to be turn off red alarm. So when the analog input is greater than 7, it will turn on the red alarm. But when it is not, it will go to the default action, which is turn off red alarm. The final function element that will be added to this project is a property trigger. The element for this will be the analog input with a property of voltage. And the action will be the logic builder we just created. So when the dial is changed, the property trigger will trigger the logic builder and either have the alarm go on and off. When you preview this in Emulator, and again, you can see when the timer goes to the next screen, when you move the analog input, you can see when the alarm is triggered. This project is now complete. Thank you for viewing this PanelPilotACE tutorial, and I hope to see you in the next video.